Doing a little bit of compound interest today. Very handy worksheet because one, it tells us this formula, and two, it's got all these like different units of time like literally written out for us. So when they have that on our homework and the quiz, we can look up on this worksheet what they mean. So here's what A, P, R, N, and T all stand for in this formula. A is your future value. Your homework's going to call it that, right? So maybe we write that off to the side also. They're like, what do they mean by the future value? That means the value in the future, as always. So that's what A is, your future value. I guess it was right here. Sorry, I didn't realize I typed that out. It's right there. A is the future value. P is your principal, your starting value. R is the interest rate. We got to change it to a decimal. And N is a big boy. N is an important one today, the number of compounding periods. So we'll get into that as we get there. And T, of course, is time in years. So suppose you deposit $3 grand in an account paying 6% interest. Talk to me. Good, bad, average. 6% interest. What do you think? That's good, right? It's bigger than 5%, so that's good, right? Compounded monthly. So what that means is you'd get interest in January, then you get some interest in February, March, April. Every month you get interest, right, in that situation. Cool? How much will it be in the account after 20 years? What do you feel about 20 years? Good amount of time, small amount of time, or medium amount of time? 20 years? Pretty good. Like you guys would be 37, 38 years old. You know, that's pretty good, right? It's not great. You know, like after 30 years, you're like, okay, that's some serious time right there. You know what I mean? But 20 years is a good amount of time. So we have got a good interest rate with a good amount of time. We should make some money in this situation. Does that kind of make sense? So here's what we'll do. They say, what is the future value? That's what homework will ask when they say, how much will you have in the account? That's asking you to find the future value. So I asked that we just kind of write it down so we could type it in our calculator. We'll start with A equals. Our principal is $3,000. And then inside the parentheses, the formula, we're just following it right here. There is a 1. Sorry, I didn't write a 1. 1 plus this fraction right here. We have to change our rate to a decimal. So 6%, we have gotten so much better at that as changing it to a decimal. Isn't that 0.06? Are you with me on that? Moving it 2 places. But here's the weird thing. We have to divide it by how often we get interest. When they say monthly, you can look at the chart, and I think we kind of knew that already, like how many months are in a year? Aren't there 12? So what is a very common misconception before we go further to everyone else is they think they get 6% interest every month. You do not. You have to take 6% and divide it by 12, and it's really like 0.002, you know, like you get that much interest every month. So that's why you always got to divide it by how many times you get interest. And then up here, it's the number of times that you get interest times time in years. What would that be? What was our time in years? 20. And again, this is not your first rodeo with this formula, but I want to make sure we understand where these numbers came from. The 12 is usually the biggest question. Like, why did you put a 12 there? Because that is n, that is the number of times we get interest. Here's what I'd like to do. I want to make this as easy as possible to punch in a calculator, and the way to do that is to figure this number out first. Could you take 12 times 20 before we even get started? What is 12 times 20? So I'm going to scratch that out and put 240. It's nice to maybe like have the 12 times 20 written down, but you know, I don't grade your work in this class. We just got to figure it out, but I like to put that 240. And the reason why is because with this calculator or the one that I put into the computer, I have this Desmos calculator embedded in every question if you want to use it. All you literally have to do is type it from left to right. So I'm going to do this, 3,000. And the real trick is where there was a parenthesis, you need to put that parenthesis. It's 1 plus 0.06, and then the fraction bar I'm going to use divided by 12 and close that parenthesis up. And then to raise it to, if you're using one of these calculators for the first time, to raise it to is this button right above your divide symbol right here. Raise it to the 240th power. And I'll do the next one on Desmos just to show you how that one's punched in right there also. But like if you do that, it does all the work for you. Are you with me on that? All you got to do is put the numbers in the formula and figure it out. Did you get this guy right here? This is money, so we're going to round to 2 decimal places because of like the change right here. So do you see it's going to be either 61 cents or 62 cents. It all depends on what this number is to the right of it. Do you want to keep it 61 or do you want to round it up to 62? Yeah, because that 3 is 5 or less, right? So, okay. So that was 993061. Please put a $ in front of it. But see, that's not all interest. How much of this was your money? You now have, after 20 years, you have like 9,900 some odd bucks in the bank, right? How much of it was yours to start with? 3,000, right? 3,000. You put 3,000 bucks in there, and you let it sit for 20 years and do this. That's the other thing about compound interest. It's just one giant lump sum, and you have to let it sit there forever, right? You know. So what you do is you take that number and subtract away your original principal of 3,000, and you made $6,930.61. So that's how much interest you made. So the way I got that was subtracting away the money that we put into the bank. Does that sound okay? Let's try another one of those. Suppose we deposit 2,500 bucks, so that's my principal. That's the P. At 5.8% interest. That's always tricky for students because they're like, dude, that is a decimal. Like, what do you mean change it to a decimal? You need to move that decimal 2 places to the right. So 1 plus 0.058 over a number. It's all dependent on how much they compound it. And you see the magic word on this one is quarterly. So you could look to the chart if you wanted to, and this chart is wrong. I don't know who typed that. That says 3 times a year. It is 4 times per year. Sorry, I didn't notice that that was wrong, so please change that to 4 times a year. Isn't there like 4 quarters in a year in that case? So 4 quarters in a dollar, so quarterly. Sorry that I had a typo there, so we're going to do it over 4. And then we'll raise it to this power right here, n times t. N is the same number that you just used in the denominator. He is how many times per year after 10 years. So let's talk before we punch. How's our interest rate? Good, medium, great, ugly. What do you think? How's our interest rate? It's pretty good. How's our time? 10 years. To you, 10 years is a long time. You know what I mean? It's like half your life, you know, but in the long run, as you get older, 10 years isn't that long of a time. Are you kind of with me on that? It's not that big of a deal. It ain't horrible, but it's okay time. Do you know what I'm saying? It's an okay amount of time. What does that mean? That I shouldn't probably expect a very large number back, right? We started with 2,500 bucks. It was an okay interest rate at an okay amount of time. It should be an okay amount of interest in that scenario. So we'll punch it in. So 2,500 parenthesis 1 plus 0.058 divided by 4 raised to the, sorry, I should have figured that out ahead of time, but it's 40, like 4 times 10 is 40 in that case. And see if you get that number right there of $4,446 and 50 what cent? 53 or 54? 54 cents. So 4,446.54. Rounding it to 2 decimal places. How much interest did we make? All we got to do is subtract away how much we put into the bank, which was $2,500, right? $2,500. So we subtract that away, minus 2,500. And we made 1946.54. You've done this one before. You might not remember it, you know, but you've done those before in an algebra class. Questions about those? Now we'll get into a more realistic thing called this APY. APY stands for your annual percentage yield. Yield is, first of all, I will also like say I'm not a financial expert, right? You know, I'm just a math dude, you know, so like if you have real financial questions, go ask an expert like Mr. Hibbs, Ms. Pro, Ms. Hart, like in the business department. They know a whole lot more than I do about it. But still, the yield is a fancy word for what you got all put together. It's like how much did we yield, like what's our total. But when they give you like 8.3% interest, as time goes by, you don't actually get 8.3% interest. You get bigger than that usually because of the money that compounds on top of itself. So financial dudes care about this APY. Here's the formula for it. But before we get to that formula, we got to see what they're asking us. Suppose you deposit $7 grand into an account paying 8.3% interest. Talk to me there, bro. How's that? Good, bad, ugly, or awesome? That is awesome. Like, you know, like getting 10% would be amazing. You know, I said 5 is pretty good. 10% is unrealistically amazing. That's way closer to 10 than it is to 5. So this is a great amount of interest. Cool. So that's good. And then how's our time? Pretty weak, right? 6 years is not that long, right? So we should be in the okay situation as well, because it's like we have great interest but weak time in that scenario. So they ask us, how much will you have in the account? AKA, they're going to ask, what's the future value? Same thing we did before. Amount equals 7 grand times 1 plus 0.083. I changed that guy to a decimal. And I also noticed that my chart forgot to put weekly on there. Do we know how many weeks are in a year? You should probably write it. Weekly means how many times a year? 52, right? There are 52 weeks in a year, if you did not know that. So put that on your chart. Sorry that I didn't type weekly on there. So this should say 4 as we fixed it earlier. And weekly is 52, so we're going to do it over 52 to the 52 times 6 power. So I'm going to figure out 52 times 6 first. That is 312. So I'm going to actually raise this to the 312th power. Let's punch that in. We should definitely get more than 7 grand because we're starting with 7 grand. Make sure you can punch it because that's the whole trick of all of this. So 7,000 times 1 plus 0.083 divided by 52. Close your parenthesis up. Raise it to the 312th power. Where did I get 312? 52 times 6, right? We're going to get interest 52 times a year for 6 years, so we got interest 312 times. And that should be more than 7 grand, which is 11,513 and 42 cents. So 11,513 and 42. See if you can figure out how much interest you earned. Nothing has changed yet. It's the same story as before. This is how much money we got. We started with 7 grand, so you just subtract them. And isn't that $4,513.42? But here's where they ask you, what's your annual percentage yield, aka your APY? We will just use this formula. We were getting 8.3% interest like for 6 different years, but what it really boiled down to is this. It's going to be 1 in parentheses plus our rate changed to a decimal, so 0.083 divided by number of times that we got interest, 52. And then here's where it starts getting changed. It's only raised to the 52nd power. You don't have to take it times like all the years. And then they ask you to subtract 1. That's just what the formula is. We don't have to discover it. We're just going to use it. So if we punch that whole mamma jamma in, it's going to give us a really weird number. That's okay. So parenthesis, 1 plus 0.03 divided by 52. Close that parenthesis up. Raise it to the 52nd, and then go off to the side to where it's not up in the exponent. If you wanted to hit equals right there, you could. You just have to subtract 1 after this, right? You know, so minus 1. And it should be a very, very, very weird number, right? Because it is about some sort of interest rate. The online homework is going to make you round it to 3 decimal places, which is the most challenging thing here, because we first have to change it to a percent. I'm going to snip this out real quick. So, because they wanted us to change this to a percent, we got to move this decimal 2 places to the right in the first place. So I know I'm at 8-something%. And they want it to 3 decimal places, so I have to look at these 3 numbers to see what I want to do. The real important number is that orange one right there. I have to see if I need to round this 6 up or not. This is a 9, so what do you think? Round that to a 7 or keep it a 6? Round it up. It's easy when I draw it out like that. It's not that easy. So you're really looking at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th place over there, right? You know, you're totally looking at the 6th place over there. So 8.647% is what they'll end up doing. Sorry, I wrote that with a highlighter. Weird. That's the annual percentage yield, about 8.6, what did I say? 647, thank you very much, 8.647%. So what I'll do is I'll have you pause the video and see if you can do number 4 without me. So in all seriousness, if you don't want to put that 1 down there, you really don't have to, because like 0.07 divided by 1 is still 0.07, you know. It's up to you if you want to use that or not. And then 1 times 10, which is 10. So we've got really good interest at medium time. 10 years is medium, you know. We've got really good interest to 7% at medium time. So we'll punch that guy in. 9 hundo times 1.07 divided by 1 raised to the 10th. And that's what I got. If you put a little different keystrokes in there, because you put the 0.07 over 1, it's all good. It ended up being the same thing as this. But $1,770.44. 1770.44. How much interest did we earn? Just subtract the 9 hundo away. So 870 bucks. Look at that. We darn near doubled our money. We started with 900. We almost made $900, right? It took 10 years to do it, though. It took 10 years to do it. And then what's your annual percentage yield? I'm going to use this formula. So 1 plus 0.07 over number of times. Since they say annually, that's going to be 1. Raised to the number of times, that's going to be 1 minus 1. So that's going to be a really cool number if you want to punch that in. Punch it in the way I have it typed. It's 1, sorry, do parentheses. Got to use parentheses. 1 plus 0.07 divided by 1 raised to the first, move over, minus 1. And it comes out to be 0.07. And that one is on here to see if that makes any sense to you at all, which is 7%. You can't even round that to 3 decimal places. But let's see if that makes sense, because how many times a year did you get interest in this scenario? Just once. So the annual percentage yield is literally the same thing as the actual interest rate, because you didn't get like interest on top of itself like 12 different times that year. You just got it once. So here, when they say, bro, you get it like every week, right? If it's 8.3%, you're actually getting about 8.647% by the time in the long run, because of the interest on top of the interest. So the more times that you get interest, the better scenario. And then the last one, I just like to explain it like this. You may have never seen this number before, but I'm going to ask you if you've ever seen this number before. Ever seen that number before? That is pi, right? And the very first time you had to come across that, that was freaking weird. You're like, what in the world is pi? Pi is some geometrical ratio of the diameter of a circle compared to its like circumference and all that stuff, but you were just told it's like 3.14. You know what I mean? It's like 3.14. It's a really, really weird number. So is this. This is a new number for many of you. It is the number E. Why is he called E? Because the man who discovered it, his name is Euler, and you spell it like this, and they just used the first initial of his last name, right? They used E. What is it all about? Continuous rates. Here's how I like to explain it. What if I went outside right now and ate a banana, and I dropped the banana peel on the ground? Would it decay? Yes or no? Yes. Does it decay weekly, monthly, quarterly, or continuously? What do you think? Continuously. Like it decays now and now and now and now and now and now and now. That's what happens in nature all the time. E is called the natural number. It is like the rate that things happen at a continuous rate. So long story short, we are going to use this formula. Its name, we call it PERT, just because of how it spells. So A is still your future value, P is your principal, E is the number, right? E is a weird number, he's on your calculator, and it's raised to the rate times time. So let's do it. Our starting value is $1,000. And then since they say continuous interest, that's the only time that you will use PERT, is if the word continuous is in there. They didn't say monthly, they didn't say weekly, they didn't say daily, they say continuously. So we will put an E in there, and then we will raise it to the rate, which is 5%, but we got to change that to a decimal, times time. So here's the scenario. 5% is pretty decent. 10 years, pretty average, and this is the best case scenario of how often we get interest. If you put money in the bank, you would get interest now, and 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 now. It is happening at a continuous rate. Best case scenario. By the way, banks don't do this, but still, this is the best case scenario. So we punch it in, and to find the E button on my calculator, do you see the number 4? Go to the left of it. We have a button called LN, but right above it, do you see E to the X, like in blue right there? So we will do 1,000. And then I got to hit the second button to get E. And my calculator automatically raises it up to an exponent already. I'm going to do the 0.05 times, was it 10? Is that right? If you wanted to figure that number out ahead of time, you could. You might have to put it in parentheses if you have a different calculator to me. We'll try it on the next one if we typed it in wrong, but I got 1648.72 is what I got back on that. So 1648.72. And if they asked how much interest you made, you'd subtract, but they did not ask. I will do that on the Desmos calculator for those who didn't get to use one of mine here. But here's the real question of the day. How did you know that you were using PERT? Because of one word, continuous. If they give you a rate continuously, 3, 4, 5, 6 is what we started with. And then we're going to use times E to the 0.06 to, holy crap, how long is this going to sit in the bank? 40 years. That is awesome. Right? Think about that. You will be 58 or 57 years old. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that is a long time, right? So times 40 years. We should get a great amount of money here. I don't know why that says a 4, but it's supposed to be 0.06. We got 6% interest, which is better than average, right? And we have a juicy amount of time right here, right? So we'll punch it in. 3, 4, 5, 6 times E to the 0.06 times 40. If you wanted to figure that out ahead of time, you could. But bada boom. Yeah, bro. 38 grand, $38,096.10. $38,096.10. If you have questions, you come see me.